Hey, Arlen, what do you call a magician who's lost his magic?
An Ian?
Oh, you got it. Ian, yeah.
Most unlikely of villains, just modes of playing and forepaws. Does it talk? Does it know how? Does it bark or does it meow? In the lair of the cerebral bore, head will show and so much more. But leave your brains at the door.
Welcome to Cerebrivore, everybody. We're back with another episode. This is BJ Boyd. I'm the host of the Arcane Alienist podcast, and I'm going to kind of coordinate our discussion this evening. And I've got three very distinguished guests with me or panelists, not guests. Nobody's a guest here. We're all part of the group. So with me tonight, first off, we got Mirke the Meek. Mirke, how are you doing?
Doing well. Happy to be here. Yeah.
All right. And we have Arlen Walker.
Arlen, hello, hi.
And finally, we have Karl Rodriguez. Karl, how are you?
Good. How are you?
All right. So for this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about magic. And it is stemmed from a discussion that I think Karl was having with Jason Connerly about rolling to cast. So we'll get to the concept of the mechanic of rolling to cast, but there's some other questions that are topics about magic that we wanted to talk about a little bit as well. But first, I thought we'd go around the couple questions, just kind of go around the circle here. First question is, of all the role-playing games you played with magic, which one is your favorite magic system? So, Mirke, can we start with you?
So I'm going to sneak in a board game first here. It's tangentially related, Hero Quest. The magic system in that is you have the different elements, 3 spells per element, represented by cards. If you're the wizard, you get to choose 3 out of 4 of the elements. And when you want to cast a spell, you just kind of play one of the cards and discard it. You can get some relics or artifacts later on that allow you to store some of those spells so you can like recast something or that type of thing. But I'll sneak that in. But then as everyone knows, I'm a big fan of Mouse Ritter, and the magic system for Mouse Ritter is, I think, based off of Glog from Goblin Punch, and it ties into like everything's in your inventory. So you get a spell tablet that has the spell. There's usage dots. You can decide how much you want to invest between 1 and 3. Then you're going to have to roll to see if you suffer some fatigue. I forgot. I think they called it madness at one point. Maybe it's now the drain condition. But then based on how many dots you invest, the power of the spell increases. So yeah, that's mine.
All right. Nice. Did you take on more fatigue the more dots you invest when you cast it?
I think it's more you are more likely to get fatigued. I suppose you could have, because conditions take up your inventory slots, you could have multiple fatigued conditions, and you're going to have to like drop items or be overburdened and basically not be able to walk or defend yourself.
Cool. Arlen, what's your favorite magic system in a role-playing game?
I don't know for certain. I really like the way that magic, very much how it is in Tolkien, is often sort of an expression of like the will or the desires of an object that we wouldn't normally think of as a character, but that takes on some character elements in some ways, right? So like the One Ring being the obvious version of this, with they always talk about how it has a will of its own and is trying to get back to Sauron. But like with Sting or any of the other Rings of Power, or even, a lot of the other, especially a lot of the famous swords that are in those Tolkien stories, the sense that the object has some sort of desire, and also has some kind of remarkable ability to influence the world that is not all of us organics influence the world, which is like part of the sort of interesting idea there, that magic as being sort of like obviously there are sort of more direct spells, but most of magic being sort of like a kind of a just a different way of influencing the world. Like the idea that Sting glows blue in the presence of orcs, and it sort of warns its bearer about enemies in the area. And obviously real people don't glow blue. They can sort of warn people about stuff other ways. But I think it's kind of a really interesting way to approach magic, to have it be so tied to kind of objects and sort of the unexpressed character of things that wouldn't normally have a character in other circumstances.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I really like the way that a lot of the 2D20 games handle magic, where basically like you roll to cast, but then often there's a lot of variability within each spell. So like even if you only, like in Conan, you might only have one spell, but you can do a whole lot of different things with it by kind of adding and subtracting the specific elements that you want out of all of kind of the broad kind of single spell ability.
Karl, what's your favorite magic system?
I think my favorite is BCC, because it's pretty simple. You roll a d20 plus and add your caster level and apply any luck modifier. And this is your spell check. You can add personality modifier too if you're a cleric or intelligence, if you're a wizard. And then you check on a table to see how well you do, and the spell doesn't necessarily go away. And you can also improve your chances using an ability called Spell Burn. But I think even though it makes the books really gigantic, it has all these really cool effects, and that's just fun because the spells can do different things, and I kind of like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, one spell might take up 3.5 pages.
Yeah, because of all those different things that can happen.
Depending on how you roll for your spell roll. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like that. It's fun and it's easy. And you can still fail. So, all right. What about you, BJ?
That's a tough one. I came with this question. I didn't even think about what my answer was going to be. I think I like. I like the kind of what you get in really original D&D, where you got a list of spells, and when you cast it, you've used it for the day, and then you go through them, and it's not so much a spell slot or a memorization. It's just you have your list of spells that your wizard can use, and you cast it. I think that was more chainmail than maybe original. I have to go back and look at original D&D. I think by D&D we did have some spell slots perhaps in preparation, but I know that original concept prior to that was because it was more of a war game kind of a scenario, so there wasn't a lot of bookkeeping involved, right? So I think things like that are just, and that's why I've kind of used that in the homebrew thing I've kind of built for my son and his friends, is that it. And I guess technically, I get this idea more from, I guess it's Into the Odd and Cairn, where the spell is it's a spell book, but it's just one small book that has one spell, and you use it, and then its power recharges the next day. It's like a single use magic item. If you want to cast the same spell more than once, you've got to track down or somehow obtain 2 copies of that spell book. Is a way to do it. So I think that works really well. It's just a lot simpler than keeping up with all the complexities of the Vancian style magic that kind of predominates D&D at least.
But in old D&D, you did roll to cast spells, didn't you? Or do you roll in
I think when they were using chainmail and stuff like that, there is a roll, and there's also a counter spell. And if you use the chainmail system, you need to use spells in combat, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, I just remember, because I don't know D&D honestly, but you guys might know it better. But I know when we were reviewing a Muckweedle that you do have to make a roll, right, as you appeal to the gods for your magic. So it's like a reaction roll, and you have to see what happens.
That was pretty cool because in Mock Weedle you don't have a distinction between wizard and magic user or cleric, and so the priest prays every day. You roll a reaction roll for the gods for each spell you request, and if they favor you, then you get it, and if they don't like it, then you don't get the spell. And if it's a really bad reaction roll, you get a little bit of a punishment. But then when you cast the spell, you also roll a reaction roll, and it really doesn't affect anything other than if it's a really good roll. If it's a really good roll, they don't take away your spell slot. They just let the spell happen, and you get to keep your spell slot.
Yeah.
All right. So by that same on the flip side of that, what about Karl? What is your least favorite magic system of any you've ever encountered?
Hard to say. I guess it's more like I don't mind.
Yeah, that's
I think
true.
You know what? I think, I think one that I don't particularly care for, mainly because you can. I guess most of these games, like including the place where you still have to make a roll, but there is the least amount of consequence, and you can really, steal the show, as it were, or at least what I've seen in gameplay, is in like a Warhammer 40K type game. So in Warhammer 40K and in Warhammer Fantasy, it's Warhammer Fantasy is a little more challenging because you have to roll it's like a 2-step process. It's like 2-factor authentication to get to the Winds of Magic. You have to roll your channel and then roll when you make enough points to get to have the channel spell levels, then you successes, as it were. Then you roll to see if the magic gets cast. Right, and now you can do it all in one round, but it used to be you had to wait a round, the channel, hold on to that, and then cast a spell in the next round. But they kind of changed that. Sort of as they release other books, they modify things. But 40K is like I've been in situations where a person who knows the rules and makes a psyker or a librarian in, say, like as you're playing Space Marines, they can stack things in your favor where the rest of the party doesn't really matter. So you can imagine a bunch of Space Marines, but then there's a librarian who steps up and churns up enough, puts enough, risk into a spell, and it's like, oh, he puts a lot of risk, so then he'll summon demons or call on chaos. But then if the player knows what they're doing, they can take talents to negate all of that. And then you have other Space Marines with their equivalent of an M214, chain gun and stuff like that. And they're like, well, why are we even here? So that kind of killed the desire for a lot of players to do that.
If you're playing the
games where the magic, the librarian, I guess it's cool.
Yeah. I guess if you're playing a war game and that's all your army, you don't really give a crap if it's your librarian that just destroys everything. But if it's everybody's here to play, and it's like, well, why am I even here with my character?
I mean, because all the other player characters are like in the thick of it and killing one or two gene stealers, but then the psyker steps up and just clears the field, and that's kind of cool. And like a very, like I say, for example, when we were playing Cohorts Cthulhu the other day with Arlen, they're in a desperate situation, and Arlen just pumped up the spell, but then they were he almost knocked himself out when he blasted the spell, and he kind of failed in a way, and he hurt his companion as well, but he cleared the field, but then there were consequences. And in this case, it's like the librarian just went basically lit up a cigarette and had a smoke, no consequence. And all the other players were, So again, like what that does, I think, in some instances, maybe some players like, oh, that's cool, yay. And if it had been like in a dire situation where they're getting overwhelmed, but then the librarian player would have sort of taken perils of the war for any consequences, it might be better. But I think because there are ways, if you like break the system, you have this. I mean, maybe it's player skill, I guess. You have a savvy player who finds the loopholes, then there's no risk.
Well, if you bring in enough,
I think that's the kind of
that's sort of an issue with the way that Warhammer has gamified chaos for a long time, right? That chaos is the destruction of all like order and structure, and also it comes in 4 flavors and a secret 5th flavor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's generally that it's like, oh, like there is some stuff that is still nasty, and I think more so in fantasy, but especially in 40K, seems like they've really gotten to the point where game wise, it's and I suspect part of that comes from the wargamer side, where it's like, oh well, it's not really fun to put 1,000 of my 2,000 points into a big psyker, and then I roll 2 dice and it turns out that it actually didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can understand from gameplay wise, but I also think it's not fun to put 1,000 of my 2,000 points into the psyker and be like, well, I rolled big, so now I just win.
I think that maybe that's what it is. Games where it makes games where there's this illusion that you roll and you take risks, but yet the game has like loopholes.
Yeah.
That negate that. Then why even roll? Just do it. Right. Just have it happen.
Arlen, what's your least favorite Magic system?
I'm going to say sort of similar to what Karl described, not necessarily as games where Magic is sort of in the fluff. It's supposed to be dangerous, but it's not actually. But I'm just going to say broadly, any game where I am playing a fighter and am top fragging a level, and then my job is to stand in front of the wizard so the wizard can kill all the bad guys.
Yep. Mark, what about you? You have a least favorite Magic system?
I'd probably say 5e, and I don't have enough experience with like 3.5 or 4 or 2 or anything to really say anything different about the other D&Ds, but there are just so many classes who can cast magic and so many subclasses, and I usually stick with martial characters anyway, but I just have a hard time when they can cast level 1 spells, or do you have to learn them, and how do you keep track of them all? I just never got the hang of it, so yeah. I kind of shied away from even playing magic using classes in that game.
What about you, BJ?
I think I'm going to agree with Arlen. I think for me, it's I've never seen a Magic system that's inherently better, worse. That I hate. It's more. I think D&D traditionally kind of has that fighters are tough at the lower level and wizards go high, and then wizards get really powerful, and the fighter's job is just to kind of keep everybody off their back while they do stuff. And while it makes for some cool strategy, it also means what you kind of do in relation to your fellow players changes over the course of the game. So I do like it when it's a little more. It's not that the game can't ever change, I would rather that change based on the situation or the problem at hand, not the character level or the point at which you are from the beginning, between the beginning and end of a campaign. So,
well, and I think oftentimes the idea of like the old school, the fighter has D4 hit points and they start with, a single spell, and also they can't use almost any weapons and can't wear any armor. And so they're basically just useless except for their one casting of sleep, if that's what the spell that they got. I find it very silly, the idea of, okay, well, the fighter, everybody who's playing a fighter gets to have fun with their class from level 1 to 3. And then if you have paid the fun tax by being a wizard and need to get the most experience points and have the least hit points, you get to level 4, level 5, and suddenly you're getting to have the fun because you invested into the fun tax early on. And it's like, why not just play a game where everybody gets to have cool stuff all the way through is sort of my thing.
Yeah.
5th level when you get the fireball and get to again clear the table.
Well, and by comparison with like Pathfinder 2 is maybe the comparison that everybody who is disliking this line of argument is going to hate the most. But I think Pathfinder 2 does a really surprisingly elegant job of giving martial characters and magical characters enough overlap that you can sort of do a lot of different things with either of them, but they also feel very distinct. That playing the big great sword dude who goes slashing through things, you never feel like the wizard who has a whole lot of different spells is ever really going to be a bigger contributor to combat than you, but also the wizard can do a whole lot of other things that as the big dude who just big great sword you're probably not going to be able to do. And so it's I think they have done a really good job of really capturing that. Like everybody has kind of a different thing that they can do, and it all works enough differently that you can be, here's the specific thing that I want to do, and here's how my class has kind of fun stuff happen.
Sorry. So yeah, I agree. Pathfinder 2 does a good job, and that's harkening back to what you mentioned, BJ, about like for 4th edition, how they started having like everyone be able to dabble in a little bit of magic, but I think Pathfinder 2 tags things well, that it's not really magic, although the damage sort of evens out, I would say. Damage and utility.
Yeah. And of course, I think that's where we get accusations that modern D&D and Pathfinder are superhero fantasy, not classic D&D, because your non-spellcasters can do these super heroic types of exploits in combat. So sorry, I cut you off, Mark. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, and if you want to play that kind of game, then go for it. I think Pathfinder 2 does a great job of balancing that. And another point is the 3-action. I don't know if you want to call it economy, but a lot of the spells have like a base cost of 2, so you can't just be slinging a melee attack 2 or 3 times a turn. So it kind of adds to that. And then if you're trying to sustain a spell on your next turn, you have to invest some of your action points to do that well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if nerf is the right word, but it certainly gives the martial classes a reason.
Yeah. Well, you pretty much, unless you take certain feats in Pathfinder 2, you've got to be in bow shot range to cast spells on your enemies. So it's not like you can hide 100 feet away. Most of them have a range of like 30 feet. So you've got to be in relatively close proximity. And so, yeah, there is a way they've kind of dial it back enough that there's still, maybe not the roll to cast it with a failure risk, but there is some risk there in having to get in close and spend most of your energy just casting the spell.
Well, and a lot of
or sometimes if the magic user or the spellcaster kind of runs on ahead of the tank and the monster jumps out and takes him down, I think you know how that feels, BJ.
Yeah, I do. It's happened 2 or 3 times to me on accident.
Well, that's sort of the other side of roll to cast is like cast with a save, right? The idea that, well, you even roll to cast as sort of being figure out how effective your spell is based on your roll conceptually. Sometimes if it goes off at all, or sometimes, right, like with Savage Worlds or DCC or something, you can have a more powerful spell if you roll well. But it seems like that's where a lot of modern games have settled on, is like, okay, well, if you can just cast at will, there is still some uncertainty about how effective it is, because a lot of things either have roll for damage or roll to save versus effects or something like that. Similar conceptually to the idea of roll your D20 to attack their armor class.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and that was a big, I think, confusion when 5e first came out for a lot of people, was this having a game where you had to, some spells or spell caster rolls as an attack, and some spells the target rolls a save, and it's like that was a little harder for people to grok initially, who had come up with D&D and Pathfinder versions before, where it was there was no spell attack roll. It was always a saving throw, or it just automatically happens, right?
Yeah.
Well, so we've kind of got into the meat of it then, rolling to cast. What are the general feelings about rolling to cast versus spells just happen because you have spell slots or number of uses or mana points to just make them happen just whenever you want? Mirke, what are your general feelings about that?
The munchkin in me does not want to have to roll cast, because I just, that's one of the reasons I stick to martials in a lot of ways. I want some reliability with my stuff. I don't, having a certain level of risk isn't fun. But also, if you have high reward for that risk, that can be really fun. So yeah. I don't mind it. I just usually stick with martials when it comes to more complex games like 5e. So
yeah.
Karl, what do you think about rolling cast in general versus?
Yeah, I'm similar. I want I want to win. I want to be in control. I want my cool thing and effect to go off. Like I want my, sleep spell to go off. I want my heal to go off in a critical situation. And I don't want to roll. I just want it to happen. And so I guess as a player, I'm not a fan of roll to cast, and I'm neutral if I'm a GM. But I mean, I kind of try to root for the player. So I want to see the big kaboom. I'd rather have players win, even if they're like holding in their guts, but I want to see them win, not just kind of get wiped. So I want things to work. That's the thing. But and I think I say that, but then, with a fighter, right? You can, a fighter, a rogue, or a martial class, you can miss at an inopportune time, right? So it's kind of like the same, right? But I guess maybe you don't think about that, or you don't think the risk is as great, even though I mean it could be, right? I mean, you want that barbarian with the great axe, for example, to be crunching people with their D12 plus lots of strength while they're raging, and if they keep missing, well, the same, right? So, but again, like I guess is because you can get corruption or resist. You have to resist shadow. So because magic is chaos and evil, the sword and sorcery genre, no matter where it comes, no matter what class you are. So then there's consequences for casting it, to roll to cast. I don't like it because I want it to work. But again, a lot of times the crossbowman will whiff, right? The sniper will whiff, the fighter will miss.
I remember now thinking about it. 4th edition was where D&D, I think, may have introduced roll to cast for stuff where, because I remember the first time a magic missile hit, we're all playing, and we're all people who played D&D at least as far back as like 2nd edition, if not further. And the wizard cast a magic missile, and it was roll, and they missed, and we all had kind of a moment of silence for the first time any of us had seen a magic missile not automatically hit. They later changed the rule. They revised it to take it back to an automatic hit. But the thing was, though, if you rolled it and you hit and you rolled a 20, you did critical damage. So there's that payoff there. Arlen, what are your thoughts on rolling to cast versus just automatic casting?
I would say I am broadly in favor of rolling to cast, with some kind of caveats. I mean, like the obvious one is just like with game balance. Obviously, you wouldn't just add roll to cast to your pre-existing 5e game, because then all the magical players would be really annoyed with you as the GM. But I think roll to cast works a lot better often in systems where there aren't as many spells, or players maybe don't have access to nearly as many spells, as a way, especially when roll to cast includes an element of not just does the spell go off or doesn't it, but also, like we were talking about with DCC, the idea of like, well, you can roll really well and have a much more powerful spell than what you necessarily expected to have. Or I think like Savage Worlds, maybe kind of, I think the perk casting tradition, you choose basically your handful of special abilities. But every time you roll to cast, and you have to succeed at your roll to cast at all. But if you get a raise, you get an even bigger effect on whatever effect you're trying to conjure up. And so out of the however many total effects there are, no character has that many, but there's a lot of variety to what you can do, because you mix and match your things that you want to do, and also you're getting some variety just even on the roll of like, okay, well, this time my attribute boost is going to take somebody from a D8 to a D10, but another time it might go all the way up to a D12. And that's so in Savage Worlds, that means that any melee character with a D12 strength is rolling that big die for every time they hit people to damage them, which is always fun. And so I think that's really where roll to cast for me shines, is if it can kind of add that element of kind of interesting variety to magic that is sort of where like that's the kind of the biggest issue with D&D magic that gets talked about all the time, right? Is that if it's just like spell slots and they do the thing that they say on the tin and you get the specific amount of them every day and all that sort of stuff, that magic doesn't really have anything of the magical variety or strangeness or anything like that, aside from the most kind of basic version of, well, it's fun to cast color spray and there's a big rainbow that sprays out. But nothing more than that, like mechanically, with all of the different stories that we're familiar with from magic is dangerous or uncontrollable or inherently chaotic or somehow less possible to be nearly so scientific about.
I think I would echo kind of what Arlen was saying. Is I like the roll to cast idea, but you don't just tack it on to something that already exists, because there are already risks, rewards, consequences, and costs to spell castings. Just take generic D&D. I don't want to roll to cast if, oh look, I just made a really good cast roll. Oh well, the monster saved. Oh, and you've lost that spell slot, so you can't cast that spell again. If I'm going to roll to cast, I think I should be able to cast. Many. It's like, fighters don't lose their ability to stab somebody. I only got 5 times I could try to stab somebody today, so let's use it wisely. I think if you're rolling to cast, it ought to be a thing where you've got a little more. You could cast more often because you've got chances of failure, particularly if there are consequences for failure.
Yeah.
So. That's why they did 4th edition the way they did, right? Is to make it so that the fighter actually couldn't stab somebody all day.
Well, they could stab somebody all day, but they couldn't stab them dramatically, but maybe once a day, right?
Yeah. Well, and the wizard could cast his, little sparks from his fingers all day, but he couldn't do his big, right? That was the idea, is everybody has your dailies and your per encounters and your at wills and all of the different action economy stuff that nobody's allowed to do their cool thing all the time.
Yeah, which is the vestige of that is why cantrips are now, they don't go away. You can cast your cantrips at will.
Yeah, but people, I guess it's another little peeve, is that people just by default they just do that, Toll of the Dead.
Well, and then they scale up the same way a fighter's damage does with a melee weapon.
Have you heard the good word? It's called Eldritch Blast, and my patron lets me do it every round.
Yep,
and it's basically like the best longbow you've ever had.
Yep,
and it can add other weird effects sometimes too.
Yeah, that's what you do.
Yeah, that's what you play a warlock. That's what you do.
I guess. I don't know. What do you think, Mark? Is it like playing like an MMO or a video game? You just keep punching the button,
I mean, when you have optimal choices, right, then it's not really a choice anymore. There are some players who are willing to not go with Eldritch Blast because they don't want to just fall into that same rut, but it kind of hamstrings the class, honestly, if you don't have Eldritch Blast.
Not anymore, as of both D&D, whatever this 5.5, 1D&D. It's a class feature, not a spell choice for warlocks now. So now all warlocks are going to have Eldritch Blast.
Yeah, and I know in Tales of the Valiant you can't cast spells at first level, so that's your thing. But then hopefully you don't get into at second level. Hopefully you have more utility and better spell that Eldritch is not jamming the button.
I will say for me, you're talking about more choices. To me, the fun of playing, particularly a wizard or a magic user, is to try to think of all the ways to use non-combat spells in combat. And it's like, I'm the Swiss Army knife. I could potentially have a solution to any problem we come up with. It may not be the optimal solution or the greatest solution or the perfect solution, but I can at least lend a hand. And there may be a couple things where that's my jam. I kind of like that, the wizards can just use sort of spells. They're like, well, that doesn't do any damage. What could you do? It's like, well, with Move Earth, I can dig a hole right underneath their feet. They're going to fall in a pit, right? And the fighter can pounce on them, or,
Yes, the question, can you create water inside somebody's lungs? I don't know, kind of an odd place, but game isn't really set up to handle that question very well, but it's a fun thing to imagine. I mean, not really fun to imagine, more like fun as the wizard to do that once before the GM house rules sit.
Yeah. Or you just, give the person you're doing it to, there's no save, then if they're using it in a unique or a different way than as intended, or as a spell description, then a fort save or something.
So what I used to do when I ran 4th edition was I would say, I actually, now that I think about it, it was a spell roll. I didn't realize I was doing it. It was, if you wanted to use your spell in a very off the wall way that it wasn't clearly something the spell could do, I would let you do it with an Arcana check. If you made an Arcana check, then you could bend that spell just a little bit to make it do something that isn't quite in the description, but still kind of fits the theme. So it would probably make strictly rules as written people cry, but
hey,
that's an interesting choice. I wonder, how would that work? I mean, it is create water like it's a cantrip, right?
Yeah, it's not supposed to be able to use it as an attack, but if you wanted to use it as an attack, where there probably be some
conceptually
rules.
There are a lot of places you don't want water. That if you created water, inside somebody's lungs, or if you created water with bubbles in it inside their blood and gave them an embolism, all sorts of things you could do with create water that wouldn't be very good for somebody on the receiving end, even though you're not supposed to be able to use it that way.
Yeah, but I guess if you did that in their lungs, then they would start drowning.
And
then you vomit.
Yeah, well, you vomit it up, but then it's not like they're going to be they're not getting any more oxygen to their blood for at least a little while.
Well, you'd have to deal with it. It would take them out of the fight at least. They're choking, and then they get to deal with the vomiting and kind of resetting themselves to be an active participant again, right?
Down, right?
Yeah.
So that's what it is. Is like you basically, they're dying and they're like vomiting water, and they're kind of like incapacitated away until they are able to till the person doesn't keep creating water in their lungs, or they pass out and are unconscious.
Well, or that's like I think I remember doing a solo game with the fate rules, and that was sort of how I handled magic. Not in the sense of being able to create water inside somebody's lungs, but the idea that what magic does, broadly speaking, is all create an aspect or create a situational change rather than like directly attacking somebody. And so you have this like really distinct role for magic that is still really useful in a lot of circumstances. But you can't just be like, point the finger of death at somebody, but you can, make the floor under them slippery, and then they're going to have a really hard time doing what they want to do on their turn, things like that.
Yeah. All right. So we've been talking about, I think we all like the roles to cast with certain conditions. It's a fair and balanced kind of rule. I'm kind of wondering about mishaps. What do you guys think about magical mishaps? I will say, to qualify that by comparison with combat with weapon combat, I'm not really a fan of fumbles, the way they're in combat, the way they're handled, because there's a very consistent circumscribed rule for a critical hit. It's double damage. If I have a consistent comparable level effect that 5% of the time I'm going to roll a 1 on my attack roll, if it's hey, you're off balance and you're disadvantaged on your next attack or something like that, that's cool. But these my 15th level fighter, who's the greatest swordsman in the kingdom, rolled a 1, and now his sword somehow has flown over the wall, down the grate, and is swallowed by an alligator that's in the moat. With a magical mishap, do you think should there be a mishap on a failed spell roll to cast? And if so, what are the parameters that seem appropriate for that? So, Mirke, what do you think?
Go ahead.
I guess it goes to the level of balance, level of risk, level of reward. If you have like really, really awesome rewards, then maybe the risk could be turned up a little bit more. I would hope that the mishaps can be not necessarily fun in the same way as hitting would be, but could give some interesting choices or change things in a fun or interesting way instead of just, yeah. I mean, corruption can be interesting because you've got to balance that and make sure you're not taking on too much. But I don't know, you just hit your character fellow heroes or something. That might not be as fun as you tried to cast a fireball and now everything is on fire and you need to get out of the building before it collapses on you, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Karl, what do you think?
I think it really goes back to like sort of the session zero in quotation marks and how you establish or how you've established how magic works in the world. If magic is like mathematics and generally neutral or from benevolent sources, then maybe there shouldn't be a mishap, right? It should be as innocuous as like like if you decide that a fumble, on an attack roll is like you're off balance, something similar to that, or in Savage Worlds you're distracted or vulnerable, whatever. But if magic comes from like say chaos or the void or from beyond, then there could be consequences of the mishap. If you fail to cast a spell, you opened yourself up to to something bad happening. So I think that's how I would sort of qualify that if the war in Warhammer, Shadow. Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember if the One Ring has that. If you miscast a spell, it's like you can be affected by Shadow or something. It's something similar to that.
In One Ring, it's if you successfully do magic, you get attention of the eye.
So like, yeah, because magic is like, not from a good source, right? Yeah. Or like in a sword and sorcery game.
It's more that like magic's something that Sauron is paying attention to.
Right. So yeah, but there's like an in-game setup for something like that.
Yeah.
Arlen, what do you think as far as balancing mishaps, make them appropriate?
Yeah, I think I agree with both of the sort of core points that magic in a system or a game where magic is very, very powerful, it feels appropriate for magical mishaps to be a part of what's going on and suitably calamitous. Right, the idea of like, well, how many in your 6-second combat round you can attack one person with a sword, but with your big magical spell you can attack 40 people. Well, you're gonna have to balance that out with what happens when that attack goes wrong, that sort of thing. And also, yeah, I agree. I think Karl's point about just what is the magic in the world like, because often that sort of goes hand in hand, right? That if magic is something very, very dangerous, right? It's the sword that cuts both ways, and so magic is very, very dangerous. But that's kind of good for killing lots of enemies with magic, because when magic is chaotic and dangerous, that can be useful. But it also sort of comes back and is not so good for the caster sometimes. And so I find that fun generally to play in that sort of game where magic is something more chaotic and also has this kind of quality of taking on the danger of casting, in particular as a way to distinguish from pulling out your sword and getting in close with somebody who also has a sword and wants to kill your character is inherently dangerous also, but as kind of a different type of danger is kind of a fun and interesting thing. And I think that it somehow that feels very much like magic, right? That like Dr. Faustus ought to be in perils of losing his soul in a way that being a talented swordsman doesn't necessarily put you in that type of danger, even if it also puts you in danger.
That makes me think of it. Kind of now that this is kind of occurring to me, I'll see what you guys think about this. A system where the risk and reward, it's in your hands. You may have a spell and you can ramp up the effects of that spell, but if it goes wrong, there's really bad consequences versus if you just maybe the baseline spells, the spell just didn't work. But I amped it up with a little more.
Yeah,
maybe I spent another round concentrating to draw in the forces of magic or chaos or whatever I'm doing. Bigger effect, but a much more dire consequence if I screw up.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly how magic was supposed to work in Modiphius's Conan 2D20, and then they rewrote the section to make the language consistent with the rest of the book, and now it's totally unclear if that's what's supposed to happen or not. But the core reasoning behind that basically is that in the book as it exists at print now, there's a whole thing about the way that you spend momentum on spells. And in everything else you can do, you can spend momentum basically at any time for specific bonuses. In the magic section, there's a specific element of spending momentum as being related to the power of the spell. And it seems to suggest to me that what you're supposed to do, or what the original vision was that you pick how many of these special effects you wanted on your spell to get your difficulty, and also you spend your momentum as building up your dice pool to get more dice. Basically, the way that it's written now makes it seem like you can just do here's my 2 difficulty spell roll, and then I'm going to take all the momentum out of the pool and put it into the spell to beef it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the effects, the other thing I would pose to you guys was if there's some sort of corruption that is maybe more slow and insidious, like you see in DCC, or maybe in a Middle Earth game where maybe you're either starting to get tainted by shadow, or there's more, you see Saran is kind of keeping his eye on you. Ways to undo that. I think if you're talking about sort of this sort of grim dark, maybe that's the consequence of being a wizard or a sorcerer, is that over time it slowly corrupts you, and you've got to decide when you've hit your limit and it's time to retire, lest you maybe lose your soul. But from a game standpoint, it's like, well, that kind of sucks. I made it to 3rd level and my character's fried. What do you guys think about, because I liken that to like Cthulhu, where, if you're really leaning into Call of Cthulhu, of course you're slowly going to lose your sanity. That's really kind of the game, is to see how far you can make it before this character goes so insane they can't be a player character anymore. But that's not what a lot of people want out of fantasy. I think even when they play more sword and sorcery kind of fantasy where you use magic, I don't think they want that idea of, we're going to see how far we're going to go till my character meets his doom. I mean, that could always happen, but that's.
Again, I think if you establish that this is the way that magic works in the world, then that's the consequence of choosing that class or that path, right? So you say, hey, magic comes from chaos. Eventually, you're going to get corrupted. So I mean, that's the way it is in the Warhammer fantasy world. Magic. There's all these winds of magic, but ultimately, you probably will fall into some sort of corruption because you'll be tempted by that power. And sure enough, in our Enemy Within campaign, the one who has the most corruption is the mage. So,
well, and also I think there's a common tendency to look at rules like that and people be like, what if we play this campaign forever? When, as we all know, most campaigns do not last forever. In fact, most of them last a whole lot shorter than that. And that it's kind of I think that the idea of, being able to play your favorite character for however long the campaign goes is one of those things that is kind of common for people to worry about when they read something like Warhammer style corruption in a rule book, but that it doesn't actually negate the ability of most players to play that particular character in the campaign. I think most campaigns peter out long before you get to the point where a character is totally debilitated in that way. Even in Call of Cthulhu, right? That how many characters actually get to the point of like totally non-functional sanity, unless you're specifically playing like one of the big campaigns that Chaosium has put together. It's like, okay, well, I think it's one of those things that people get worried about more than it actually ever affects player characters, basically.
Yeah.
Mark, what do you think about those mitigating corruption or?
Well, if you have corruption as kind of like a long-term balancing effect, if a mage is going to be spamming magic constantly, they're going to get corruption as a means of like pacing them. If the ways of reducing corruption are hard enough to still have that balancing effect, then I don't see why not. But I think it's bound by genre. So what's the expectation of whatever the genre is? Is that part of it? And if so, then
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and also, I think it's a thing that is relevant is that in a lot of games, depending on how corruption or mutation or whatever else is treated, it is often bad, but has its own sort of specific benefits that don't necessarily outweigh the things. I think about especially like The Witcher is sort of the perfect example of this, where Geralt has gone through all of these strange mutations to become a Witcher, and they limit his ability to be part of normal human society, but also they're really useful for fighting monsters. And I think even in Warhammer setting stuff, there's often an element of that, right? Some of them are pretty obviously not so good, but things like oh well, now your eyes are like a cat's, and so you can see in the dark, but everybody's a little freaked out. And it's like, well, it's kind of a trade-off.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Hey, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We had one other kind of topic we wanted to cover, and that is maybe looking at different sources of magic. Games where magic is just sort of one thing, versus a game like D&D where you've got, in older editions, at least 2 sources of magic, and sometimes up to 4 to 5 sources of magic, depending on the edition and the supplements you want to use. I think I can think of divine magic, arcane magic. Now, a lot of times they separate druid sort of stuff off from divine magic, and it's sort of a primal or primordial type of magic. You've got psionics. You've got ki, which is the ability of monks, which is somewhat supernatural. And then even like the packs, now that warlocks have become more of and witches have become more of a mainline feature of the fantasy role playing, even saying that maybe that's even something different than just regular arcane magic, as well as like alchemy and artifice. If you're using artificers from D&D, so potentially all kinds of sources of magic. What do you guys think about the pros and cons of there being one type of magic versus multiple types?
Also draw on the force that connects all living beings in the universe together.
Yeah.
Use that and be able to target things without a computer.
Yeah. So, Arlen, what do you think about what's your preference, or is it somewhere in the middle, or where do you
I think my preference is generally for something a little less kind of kitchen sinky than a lot of modern D&D. I think that a lot of those kind of like the way that a lot of modern D&D or D&D-esque games have, a bunch of different character classes that have magic, and it's all kind of broadly similar in the sense of all being like spells that you can cast, but it's a different source. In my own games, when I run those types of games, very often want to be like, okay, well, this is a world where there's no wizards and there's no alchemists and there's no clerics and there's no druids. There's just warlocks. That's how you do magic in this world. And within the warlock class, often there's kind of enough things that you can get to hit a lot of those other places if what you really want is like a healer, right? There's kind of ways to do things that help with that. But it also kind of gives the magical a really distinct, like specific focus compared to what it kind of otherwise ends up in D&D. And I tend to, I mean, especially in a lot of the sword and sorcery stuff that I really like, that's a really core assumption, is that magic has like a particular flavor, and even the people who are maybe not as evil doing magic, they're definitely have some of that flavor. And, you know, Conan can smell it on somebody when they walk into the bar looking for him, and all of the stuff of like, well, here's a ton of different ways to get your magical spells. Like, nope, ultimately it comes from knowledge of demons, and you just have to make your peace with that if you want to cast spells.
You know, one of the first third-party supplements for 5th edition is Primeval Fool, and you could technically use all the classes from the player's handbook, but in the book they recommend just using warlocks for that very reason. Just thematically, they fit the swords. If you're going to allow spellcasters at all, only use warlocks, and maybe paladins if you want to have some sort of holy warrior with a little bit of a divine ability.
Yeah,
what do you think?
How often do you get your powers from some being, whether it's an angel in some cases or a demon or whatever, when it comes to being a warlock, a fae, archfey? But how often do characters actually like interact with that being? You know, it's like you get your powers and then you just do your thing. I think that's kind of like the stereotype for a 5e character. Unless you're like really into story and narrative, then you might have this relationship with your pact person. So I don't, yeah. There's so many different ways you can get magic in 5e. I like that there's some variety, but it does feel kitchen sinky, as Arlen was saying. And yeah, it's so commonplace magic. It feels weird at the same time. I don't know how much sense I'm making, but throw that out there, I guess.
It is a certain flavor of high fantasy that if you're in the mood for it, great. But if it doesn't fit everything, and it can get very. There can almost be so many amazing things that nothing is amazing. Nothing is special because when everything's fantastic, nothing is fantastic. Karl, what do you think about multiple types of magic?
I don't know. I was contemplating this question. I feel like I'm leaning more towards like magic comes from a single source, and whether the player characters in the world know that or not, it still just comes from a single source. Like I love how, like in Hyperborea, right? It comes from sorcery is sorcery, whether you think it's ascribed to divine or it's ascribed to whatever, but it just is sorcery, right?
Yeah.
And the kitchen sink, like the kitchen sink variety becomes very restrictive, right? Like in Pathfinder 2, it's primal or occult or divine or arcane, and then one can't cross the other, and everything has a tag, and I don't know. Or like in Star Wars, right? Everything comes from the Force, and whether you're a witch of Dathomir and you believe it's quote unquote magic, it's still like Force, right? You're tapping into Force, or whatever you think in Traveler, a world somewhere on Backwater where there is a psionic class, but it's psionics, even though they think it's magic or from the gods, it's still psionic. Yeah. So I kind of like, it doesn't matter what the people think, it is still ascribed to one source. Like Maqueedle, right? You could be praying to the gods or praying to the spirits, or it just comes from quote unquote you, but it's the same source. I feel like I'm leaning towards that, and I don't like this sort of schools of magic and different flavors, because it can become like a tour in bookkeeping, right? Or you have at the table, you have like a rules like, oh, you can't use that scroll because you're primal and that spell is on the arcane list or something.
Well, I think the problem D&D gets into is D&D has a mechanical game, and then they try to create a narrative to justify the mechanics, and sometimes it falls apart very easily. Like for a while, I think they're moving away from it, but for a while they tried to sort of, as they were particularly using the Forgotten Realms as their default setting. Well, all magic comes from the weave. Whether you're a cleric, a druid, a wizard, a sorcerer, it all comes from the weave. It's like, okay, well then, why can't wizards cast Cure Light Wounds? And why can't a cleric cast Fireball?
I mean, that's the other, right? The idea of like, if all casters in your world are warlocks, it's like, oh, the dude who sold his soul to a demon is just as powerful as the guy who does a whole lot of push-ups every morning and practices with his sword. I mean, that's kind of the other side of the D&D balancing thing. It's like, well, okay, but I mean, that Faust was able to do some pretty cool stuff, right? And like by comparison, nobody who was just really good at doing push-ups was going to do the sort of things he was doing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think that the warlock, one of the things the warlock has opened up a lot of cool concepts. On the other hand, it's sort of almost like the thief. Before there was a thief, anybody could try to pick a lock, anybody could disarm a trap, and then it sort of created this niche that didn't exist before. And I think the warlock has done that as well, where before anybody could make a pact with an otherworldly being, and the DM and the player would just sort of figure out what that meant. Now it's like, well, anybody who makes a deal with the devil must be a warlock. That's the only. It's like, well, no, you could say that
you get to multi-class into warlock for the next level.
Yeah, or just say, well, that barbarian, his rage is because he made a pact with a rage demon. Mechanically it's the same as. Yeah. But once you kind of codify it that way, everybody starts focusing on, well, it's a warlock. And I have this list somewhere that's similar to that, where it's like, not everybody that plays an instrument is a bard. Well, not everybody with a bad temper is a barbarian. Not everybody that, picks. Not everyone that uses tools is an artificer.
I think it's kind of broadly a thing with modern, especially 5th edition, of trying to sort of have both a game that has all these mechanical elements and all of these kind of lore elements, and as opposed to a lot of the superhero games where it's just like, here's what these specific effects cost and you can describe it however you want, but this is what you're going to roll. Is, I think, that's where I think you would get this idea of like, well, anybody can just make a pact and you just, add 20, right? In GURPS, you add, here's my disadvantage, 50 points of demonic patron, and I get 50 free points of whatever else that the demonic patron is giving me as a bonus. And that's like, really easy because it's all just mechanics. And the D&D has fallen into that weird place of, right? I mean, it's the same. That's broadly why people complain about like all of the parties have all of these, super marginal fantasy races in them. It's like, well, yeah, because they're the ones that have the cool bonuses, and you can't get those bonuses any other way, apparently.
The fault of that starts though way back, because people start complaining about, well, so then to combat that, they've taken away like at least the stat bonuses associated with a specific species. Well, now elves and dwarves have always had bonuses. It's like, they kind of laid the foundation for that problem back in old school D&D way.
Well, yeah, even back in racist class times, it's like, okay, well, if the limitation on elves is that they can't get to 10th level, they have to stop at 9. It's like, okay, how many basic games get that far anyway, right?
Yeah.
Well, just like an entropy
drawbacks to playing non-humans way back, class restrictions, level limits.
Yeah, and that was like a balancing thing, right? Because they get bonuses up front or special abilities up front.
Yeah.
Right. Like the infamous infravision, right? Then but it seems like it's entropic in nature. I mean, so you have, like you were saying, in Forgotten Realms, it all came from the weave. But then there's like this dark side of the weave called the shadow weave. Yes, and then there's wild magic. It just becomes bloated. I think I would like a game, and I think like say a superhero game, right? You can dress up like a magic user. You can dress up like a mage and say that your power is magic, but really it's just all from the same source. It's just you call yourself super mage, but it's still magic. It's still a superpower.
Yeah.
It's not really magic. It's just
Yeah, you play as
right.
you play as Doctor Strange in your Marvel game, and it's like, okay, well, in Doctor Strange's own movie, he gets to do a lot of weird stuff. But in this game, what he gets to do is he can put portals different places, and also he can put bindings on characters, and he has like a basic attack, and that's what magic does in this context, right?
Yeah, and
And he gets to be a snooty know-it-all. Anybody
who doesn't
wants
know how to
talk
say
about.
penguin properly?
Yeah.
All right. All right. One last thing I wanted. It was related to that topic with psionics. Well, I think a lot of people feel like, particularly in fantasy games, psionics is kind of a weird. Speaking of which, Marvel, whenever I've seen several times in comics and in a couple of animated series where it's like something affects everybody who's sort of psychically sensitive, and it always shows Professor X, Spider-Man, and Doctor Strange. Their powers come from completely different sources, but they all have some sort of super sensitive, empathic ability. But what's the role for psionics? Should it be distinct from magic in a fantasy game, or should it just be kind of rolled into it?
I'll go first. I think that it works in some games, but I think the best way to handle it broadly is kind of like the monk, where the idea is, well, because the monk has this specific discipline, they have this key resource that supposedly, right, it's sort of like the Jedi, right? The idea that like, well, everybody has a little bit of connection to the Force, but unless you work at it, you can't really use it for much of anything. And I think that's broadly the best way. I think the problem with psionics as just like a thing that you layer on top of regular D&D is then it's like, okay, well, what do you actually do with it? Why is it like particularly useful or not useful? How does it actually like play at the table in terms of the things that you want to do? And if you have this concept that some people just have this special ability, well, isn't that already kind of what the classes are, right? These are the things that your character knows how to do that potentially other people could learn, but this is like the specific set of things. And so, yeah, that's kind of my pitch for psionics. Is the best way to use psionics is to have it be a class and they do psionic stuff, and maybe other characters can, take levels in that class in multi-class terms if they want to have psionic abilities also.
They tried. They still don't have a psionic. I mean, they've gone out of their way not to have a distinct psionic class in 5th edition. They finally settled on is there's a psionic version of some of the other classes, including
every game should just
sorcerer.
do Knights of the Old Republic style. You can start taking levels in Jedi after you reach Dantooine.
Yeah. Mirk, what do you think about psionics in fantasy?
In fantasy, I think it's a little. It feels more of like a sci-fi type of trope, or Stranger Things is more of a modern day, horror Cthulhu-esque type thing. Not so much in fantasy. I mean, you already have the fantasy, magic powers powered by magic, I suppose. I don't. If it's just about genre, I don't see why you need it. But if you are going to do it, I agree with Arlen. Just make it a class and go from there.
Karl, what do you think?
What do I think? I don't know. I'm glad that they've really kept it distinct in the latest edition. I thought it was a strange add-on back in AD&T. I guess they tried to make it so it's like it's exotic and odd, and everything has a pseudo-sonic ability. It's like an extra thing. I mean, I like in 3.5 that they just made these kind of things initially supernatural abilities, but then they tacked on psionics through third-party stuff and other. I don't know. I like it in more of a sci-fi context than in fantasy.
Yeah.
It's just a strange thing. I mean, I guess maybe the only thing is like let's say in a world like Dark Sun or Magic, you contribute to the destruction of the world, so then something else has taken its place or something else has evolved or developed, and that's why I can see like psionic capability, where like a lot of classes, species, etc., can have it. Might be a cool idea as an alternative to just the destructive or the chaotic nature of magic, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know. That kind of breaks the theme of this type of power as destructive. It's kind of like a loophole. And again, I like to shy away from loopholes.
If you're going for science fantasy, then it could fit a little better, but it's not your pure fantasy in that case.
Yeah.
But then do you add magic to that too, right? So do you throw like, magic in your Thundar the Barbarian world, where it's like sort of science fantasy and there's psionic capabilities,
Yeah.
or what?
Necromancers amongst the living, so too are there vivimancers amongst the dead. And that's where you do psionics, is that the vivimancers amongst the dead also have other special abilities too. That's how they influence the world, maybe. Or another acceptable use of psionics is like all of the funky Pathfinder 1 versions of barbarians that are not really like regular barbarians, but they have some type of special rage thing that works the same way. Like the nanomachines barbarian from Iron Gods, that as a psionics thing is acceptable. If psionics is like Bane, where it's like, I'm going to tap into my animal rage sort of thing, that's cool.
Yeah. I wonder, you're talking about science fantasy, like the Force, traditionally, almost every use you see of the Force seems to be a psychic power. It's telekinetic, it's telepathic, it's empathic, it's psychometabolism, until Palpatine shoots lightning out of his fingers. And you're like, whoa, and it's really cool, but doesn't seem like a psychic kind of thing. Now that looks a lot more like magic. And then, of course, as we've gotten into these sort of newer era where you see the witches of Dathomir, they do things with the Force that looks much more like magic.
I will point out that one of the core themes in the original trilogy is Luke's initiation into the Jedihood and understanding the Force and all that. And we see evidence of just how serious that is once he on the forest moon of Endor, right? He sees the Force ghosts and Leia doesn't, right? That's sort of capping on his initiation, is that both of them, having presumably started from the same level of Force awareness, he has now passed to the ability to recognize this. I think you could make a solid argument that the like blue Force lightning that we see, at least within the context of the original trilogy, is similar to Force Ghosts in that it is a visual awareness of something happening in the Force that is very, very, painful and suffering and all that sort of stuff. But nobody else actually sees the Emperor cast Force lightning
That would
except
be really
for Vader
cool.
and Luke, right?
Yeah.
Until you get into the modern stuff, and then you end up with Palpatine using Force lightning on Mace Windu, and Mace Windu is able to turn it back with lightsabers. Like, okay, well, that's definitely electricity. But just within the original trilogy, I think you could make the solid argument that the blue lightning is just a representation of essentially a psychic damage phenomenon, and that's how it is experienced to people who are initiated.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
I like that, but it's probably just George Lucas kind of jumped the shark when it came to Return of the Jedi.
Well, no,
he didn't know what he was doing.
I think he was just like, wouldn't it be super cool if we had a character who could shoot lightning out of his hands? Which is why he did it so many times in the prequels, right?
Yeah, it's more of that. But I mean, I think, Star Wars is an awesome phenomenon. But I don't know how much George Lucas thought about this before the second movie came out.
Yeah, I think Lucas is more like, this will look cool. People will like it. The audience will be entertained. And he's like just trying to get his bagel and coffee. And there's all these fanboys asking him for logical explanations for stuff.
It's like the Wikipedia the Wikipedia page on the Corellian belief in hell, because Han Solo says, "I'll see you in hell." And it's like, oh, yeah, it's just because it's a fun line in the movie. It doesn't really matter whether the Corellians have a belief in an alternate dimension called hell that is basically like Earth hell, except that it's specifically what they believe.
I've always said you can make a living if you can just get on camera in any live action Star Wars as an extra. If your face appears on camera, it doesn't matter what you're doing. There's at least 500 fans online, and you've got fan fiction, and they've created a name for your character if no one else did, and then you can make the convention circuit. You know, you were just back there, you know, stacking boxes behind a starship, and they're like, no, that's Jameis Gorfinson. He's my favorite Star Wars character, and you have websites developed to him and a whole backstory.
Yeah, the all of the different Jedi that appear in the big battle in Attack of the Clones, and all of them have names. It's like, okay.
It's like, damn it, George, when you name it, they get attached.
That's right. You guys realize that.
Yep. And of course,
Wat Tambor, Coleman Trevor. And Wat Tambor isn't a Jedi. He's one of the banking clan leaders or something.
Yep.
Kit Fisto is the guy with his tentacle dreadlocks.
Yeah.
And
all those guys, and then 90% of them get killed. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's what happens to characters that aren't the main people in Star Wars.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, Star Wars is an interesting phenomenon. I like what Mirke said, is that, you know, he jumped the shark and turned the Jedi, complete with cannibal teddy bears, and, you know,
the only people in the universe that understand like actual insurgency warfare are the teddy bears.
Right.
Yeah.
The ATST walkers suddenly have like weird anthropomorphic type sounds and
balance problems.
Balance problems. And then
stormtroopers are allowed to take off their helmets.
There's I don't know, my whole life I watched this, and we're off on a tangent, it's probably time to write it, but I remember, actually, it wasn't until I was watching Return of the Jedi with my son, and Han Solo punches a stormtrooper in the face and he goes down, and I'm like, what the hell is their armor even for?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. I mean, that's a classic, right? That's like the movie thing of all armor in medieval movies is basically just made out of like paper or something. Yeah. Because you just slice right through chainmail, or the same sort of, right? Somebody, you know, a knight wearing like a full, right, an Uruk-hai with his like full helmet, and Aragorn socks him in the face basically because he can't reach his dagger in time. It's like, okay, so I mean, he actually broke his toe later on, so he knows exactly how bad an idea that is, right? But he hadn't done it by that point, so they couldn't explain it to him.
Yeah. Well, maybe for Han Solo, when he says "see you in hell," maybe that's a particular, you know, mine on Corellia called H.E.
No, it's a Corellian religious belief in an alternate dimension called hell that is basically like Earth hell.
I'm trying to think of a scientific rationale.
No, that's the rationale they came up with. That's the logic.
Yeah. Then just to bring it back a little bit, that's what I think. It comes down to psionics. It's like there's some pseudo-scientific reason that you can do these psionic powers, whereas in fantasy, it's just magic, and you just chalk it up to magic and leave it at that.
Yeah, and I've seen, I can't remember where it was, is a critique of psionics in D&D, and they said the problem with psionics in D&D is no one ever sort of tried to create a fantastical take on that phenomenon. Down to even how we tend to name the psionic powers.
Yeah.
And they have very modern names. It's a very modern conception of ESP and you know, the sort of the meditative practices, they aren't actually modern. They go way back, but to the West they're very modern, you know, kind of yoga like stuff, versus trying to just make it mind magic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's part of the issue, right? Is they were like, "Oh, Dark Sun, we're going to take away everybody's arcane magic because it's bad," and then they just create psionics as another thing that you could do that also does most, right? You get a lot of the same stuff from psionics now. It's like, oh, well,
Well, it's probably a good place to stop before we get off on another big tangent. So I want to thank everybody
Star Wars myth is next. Star Wars myths and tropes.
Well, that
debate
actually
on exactly what point did Star Wars ship the shark?
Not Star Wars myths and tropes, but actually, I think it would be a good episode to do Star Wars as a role-playing game, licensed and unlicensed. Favorites. What do you like?
Oh yeah, because there's a lot of like non-licensed stuff that is like quote unquote Star Wars, right? So that'd be a good one.
Some of it better than the stuff that's licensed.
Yeah.
All right.
Some of the stuff that's licensed.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for the conversation. Mirke, anything you want to parting comments or anything you want to promote or remind people of?
No promotion really, but whatever you're doing in your role-playing game, I think the most fun part is being able to make interesting decisions. And hopefully your magic system, your psionic system, can help your players make interesting decisions.
Yeah. Good point. Arlen, anything you want to?
Mirke took mine.
Sucker.
No, in all seriousness, really, it is. I mean, it's a classic that, like, the core of RPGs for me is, making decisions as a character, and magic can help with that, or it can also take away from it if you do it in certain ways, and just, think about how it works and all that.
Karl?
Yeah, I guess with regards to magic, like I was thinking, I guess you can go. The important thing is to be consistent, really communicate the expectations about your magic system to your players, or how magic works, or how it's. Maybe they don't know how magic works, although nowadays with modern games, the meta is very strong. But I think it should be mystical. It should be a bunch of theories and how it really works, but really no one knows how it really works. I kind of like that idea more than it's this is the way it is. Meta equals player character knowledge as opposed to player knowledge.
Yeah.
But with that, your mileage may vary. I think promotion. Mark, you should have promoted your podcast. Arlen, maybe yours will come back. So, the Mirke the Meek, right? Podcast.
Yeah.
And then live from Pellam's Wasteland for Arlen, and then me, the GMologist presents, both the YouTube channel and podcast. So there you go.
All right. Well, thanks again, guys. And of course, my podcast, the Arcane Alienist, is also, we're in the middle of RPG a day a month, so we're getting daily episodes out, but I don't know if, hopefully I'll at least be able to get back to kind of weekly once we ramp down from that. So, but we'll put links to everybody's stuff in the show description, the episode description for the show. So thanks again, guys. This has been Cerebrivore. If you got anybody listening, there will be information in the show description. If you have comments, thoughts, or questions about anything we've talked about, give us a message. You can find us also on the Audio Dungeon Discord. You can leave messages there, either just a type message or a recorded voice message. And from time to time, we do like to get back together and kind of respond to messages. So we'd love to hear from you guys out there. But we'll be back at some point in the future, I'm sure, with another interesting topic. Until then, wherever you are out there, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you later.
Yep.
A Nerds and Co-broadcast, Cerebrivore podcast. Let's savor all the flavors from the spinal tap straw. The all-stars of pods past, Cerebrivore podcast. You're counting down your last as you admire them all. Zombies, blood and teeth will soon be scraping your brain and clean. What I mean is this machine is a freak, and from what I understand, it hasn't eaten for weeks. Don't look now, the Cerebrivore is coming, and all All that's left is the crying and the running. You can breathe and you can hide all the above in any order. Just another brain burrito busters running for the border. Just a snack, tried to warn you, did I stutter? Beer and pain, all its various breads and butters. All you can eat unabated, and its dust is never sated. Is it savoring the flavor of the memories it created?
Oh,
Nope.
bad dad
What?
joke.
So,
Ian,
And
Yeah.
a magician who's
Yeah.
lost his magic
take
is
the-
just
take
called Ian.
the word magic out of magician.
Ian.
Yeah, that was not a good
Yeah.
one. All right.
Oh, nice. Okay.
All right. Welcome to
No, it's not a good
Cerebrivore.
dad joke.
Are there any good dad jokes?
That's the whole point.
Where dad jokes have not gotten better.
Everybody just takes 1d6 psychic damage
Yeah.
Ah,
from the bad dad joke.